welcome to Knitting Noodles. Today's video I'm gonna go over another random stitch in this big book of knitting where I flip to a random page and we both figure out how to do the stitch together. In the future I would like to do a different book, but right now this is like the biggest book of stitches that I have. I have my eye on another one, but I'm waiting for it to go on sale. So we're gonna deal with this for now. And the summer knitting challenge is now live. It has been live since I think yesterday is when it officially started, but the first prompt was released on the 1st, and the prompt is nature. You're gonna share a picture of what inspired you and then your finished project or projects, and we're gonna make a whole bunch of really cute stuff. I've already started mine. If you want a sneak peek, I'll be releasing little snippets on my Instagram story as I'm making, but yeah, really excited to get going with that and make a whole bunch of stuff. But enough of that. Let's get right into this and flip to a random page. Oh, that's a pattern. Redo. It's another pattern. There we go. This is a little bit of lacy stuff. So now I'm gonna pick one of them. Let's see, left hand, right hand. Let's go with this one because this one's looking really funky. It's a little mesh detail. It says it's easy. Oh yeah, that looks really easy. Let's just get right into it. I don't know if I need to figure it out beforehand, but I'll do a few rows just so we got that completely under control, and then we'll go over how to do it. Okay, so after a bunch of research, because the pattern was very unclear, and a bunch of experiments, I finally figured it out, and I figured out 3 other variations of the same pattern. So this is the first. This is what the actual pattern is. It looks really cool and neat. I think this is like the perfect mesh, in my opinion. Same both sides. So like I'm picturing like a fishnet like top or stockings. I feel like this is what you would make it out of. Obviously smaller yarn, so it would be a little bit tighter, but this is the patterning that I would want in fishnet. But I figured out a few other variations. Now most of the videos that I found did not have the pearl variation, which was in the book. So this is just pearls. Most of it had the knit variation, which is just knits. Very different look than this, even though just purling and just knitting both equal garter stitch. The look of the mesh that you get is completely different. This is almost more structured. It is a little bit more stretchy than this one, but I don't really like how the lines run through it as much. But this is the knit variation. It definitely has some decorative potential. It's just not as mesh-like, in my opinion. Now, some of you might prefer how this looks. And I'll show you how to get both of them. I'll show you all the variations that I figured out. And the last one, because I was playing around with it, I figured I might as well do one that's knit one side and purl on the other. So that is how this one looks, which I actually really like how this one looks. This is, I believe, the knit side, and then the other side is the purl side. It's almost reversible. Not quite. This one clearly is the outside. I do like how it has the columns more like this one does, even though it's knit and purl. There is still kind of that sideways continuation in this, but not as much. So I prefer this one over this one. but that's just my opinion. And then I will take you through the steps and how to do each one of these. All right, so for mesh stitch, you want to work an even number of stitches. So cast on 10, because 10 is a good sample size. I am using, this is a worsted weight Pima cotton, and I'm using, I believe, size 6 circular needles. Feel free to grab straight needles. Just lately I've been really preferring circular needles. Not sure why. I was totally against them like a year and a half ago, but I don't know, something happened and converted me to basically only using circulars. So in your cast on method, I think this is the German twisted longtail. It just makes such a neat edge, in my opinion. I do have a video how to do this cast on. It's gonna be up over this way. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If you don't want to do German longtail, any cast on will work. All right, so to start off with, you're going to need at least 1 stitch on either side. This is the knit border, garter stitch border. There's another term for it. I'm just blanking right now. But the first and last stitches are always going to be knit. You can have more stitches. So let's say you wanted more of a frame around your work. You could cast on more stitches and save like 2 or 3 of those stitches just for the border. And it would frame the piece out. And it would also prevent some of this curling if you make a border all around. Now, some sources that I found said that you should do a setup row. In my opinion, it's not really necessary. Do the setup row if you want. At least for German longtail, it already has that nice edge at the bottom. So I feel like it doesn't need. But if you want to add that extra row, go for it. A setup row just means that you just knit or just purl before you start the actual pattern. If you wanted to add an all-around border, you would do, let's say you're doing three stitches to frame it, you do 3 rows before you start the pattern, and then 3 rows before you cast off. Just for sampling this, you don't have to do that though. So we're gonna do 1 stitch, knit, and the next stitch, no matter what variation you're doing, you're gonna be starting with the yarn over. We're gonna be starting off with the purl one because that's what was in the book. So you're gonna do a yarn over, up and over the needle, and then back to the front and purl 2 together. Yes, sir. It's bedtime. Okay, where were we? We were just at purl 2 together, do another yarn over, back and front, purl 2 together, and you're gonna continue this until there's only 1 stitch left. So yarn over, 2 together, and look at that, there's 1 stitch left. And you're just gonna bring the yarn to the back and knit that first stitch. All right, now this is where the directions from the pattern, I was very confused, and that's what led me on this research craze. Over here, it says knit 1, yarn over, purl the next stitch, and the yarn over together, and repeat. Did not know what they were saying. I was trying to figure out if it was purling the yarn over that you just made with the next stitch, but all they mean is you're purling the next 2 stitches together. I don't know why they had to specify you're purling the yarn over as well as the next stitch, because it makes it really confusing. So you're gonna do a yarn over, and it's the exact same thing as that first row. Yarn over, and then you're gonna purl 2 together. That includes that yarn over that you made, which now counts as a stitch. So I'm just calling it purling 2 together, because that's all that is. Yarn over, purl 2 together. So technically, if you think about it, this is really just a 1 row repeat. There's not a real difference between the first row and the second row, other than yarn overs, I guess. But as we keep going, it's going to be the same for both rows. So technically it's just a 1 row repeat, but it's considered a 2 row repeat. Bring it to the back and knit that frame that you're making. You could alternatively slip stitches, just knit them. Easier. And then you're just going to keep going with that. So knit the first and the last stitch. First stitch, start with the yarn over, bring that yarn to the front, purl 2 together, yarn over, purl 2 together, and continue to the end. And then you're just going to keep working like that until your mesh looks like this, to your desired length. Like I said, I think this would be really cute in something that needs like a fish net vibe, because that's what I get from this. It feels fishnet to me, but I think it's a really pretty mesh, and I like how all the rows have like almost like a decorative ball on it from the purl bumps. Really like this. So that is the purl version of the eyelet mesh. So we'll call it Purlwise or Purl Eyelet mesh. Now there's the other versions of the eyelet mesh. Let's first go over the knit eyelet mesh. So it looks like that when it's all stretched out. Ignore this first like line across. That was an experiment with a different type of yarn over. Did not pay off. So just ignore that and look from here up. And that's what it looks like. So let me take this off and we'll redo it, and it's literally the same thing, but you're doing knit stitches instead of purl stitches. So let's get 10 more on our needle. And I'm just starting right away with the pattern. I'm not doing the setup row. You can do a setup row if you want. So for this, yarn over, and now you're just gonna knit 2 together. This one, for some reason, for me, feels a lot more awkward than purling, which I never thought I would say that, because purling always has felt really uncomfortable for me. I think for most knitters, purling is a little bit, never feels as comfortable as knitting. But for this particular pattern, I think it goes a lot smoother and easier when you're purling 2 together instead of knitting 2. And especially this first row, the knitting 2 gets really uncomfortable. Come. Yarn over, knit 2, and then that last stitch is just a regular old knit stitch. If I could get to it. There we go. And then it's the same thing as the purl on the other side, same thing as the first row, except for knitting. So knit 1, yarn over, and then knitting 2 together. And knit 1. And that is the 2 row repeat of this. Just continue on. Remember, it's knit the first and last stitch, Your repeat starts with a yarn over, so you're going to do yarn over, either knit 2 together or purl 2 together, and then continue yarn over, knit 2 or purl 2 together until the last 3 stitches where you're going to yarn over, knit or purl 2 together, and then that last stitch is always a knit stitch. So that is the knit variation of this. And now again, let's repeat with the really fun, funky knit and purl combo version. This one I really like. I can picture this being a really nice, like, lacy scarf. This to me looks more like lace than it does like mesh. Maybe because of the little almost diamond patterns going on here. But to me it feels more lacy than mesh-like. So I can see like really nice scarf, something more decorative, maybe like a headband, something like that. This one I'm not sure. The knit version, let me know what you would use that for. I just personally am not that big of a fan of it. I don't know what there might be use for it that I haven't thought of. Like maybe a market bag would be all right with this. I don't know though. All right, 10 stitches. Then we're gonna do that knit purl variation. All right, so it's up to you what you start with. I don't think it matters at all. Either way, you start with a yarn over. Now you decide whether that first row you want to do purls or if you want to do knits. I think for this one, I'm going to do purls just because this first row, because I cast on kind of tight, I feel like purling for some reason is a little easier. That's the only reason why I'm going to start with purls. But same pattern, yarn over, purl 2 together, yarn over, purl 2 together, and then knit 1. First and last are still always knit. And the other side, we're going to knit 1. Yarn over. Now instead of purling, we're going to be knitting on this side. So these two are getting knit together. Yarn over, knit together, and continue until that last stitch. Remember, the repeat starts with the yarn over, which means you end with a knit 2 or purl 2 together. So here we are at the last 3, yarn over, knit 2 together, and that last stitch we knit. And then you just continue going back and forth like that. This side, we're back to purls. Now a good rule of thumb, at least what I do, especially towards the beginning, when you can't really differentiate the two sides as much, is I like to pay attention to where the tail is. Now if you're doing a long tail cast on, your tail is going to end up on a different side. So I just pay attention for this. Since I started with a purl row, I'm working away from the tail. So I try to remember for the first portion of this. As I keep going, I'm able to tell by how the knitting looks. But if you can't read your knitting yet, that's fine. Just pay attention to the tail. So going away from the tail is one side, going towards the tail, working towards the tail is another side. So I know for this, since I started with the purl side or the wrong side, that I am going to be working away from the tail. And that's the end of that row. Now I flip it over, and you can see going this way, you're going to be working towards the tail. And I try to remember in my head that going towards the tail means that it's the right side or knit side. Now, like I said, it could be opposite for you because long tail cast on, the tail ends up on a different side than the regular short, wouldn't be called short tail, than the beginner cast-ons, I guess. It ends up on a different side. So just pay attention to what side the tail is on and if you're working towards it or away from it on your first row. And that's really all there is to this. Let me just finish this row up here. 2 together and knit that last stitch. This is what it starts looking like. Now you can kind of tell, speaking of reading your knitting, you can kind of start to tell where the knit side is and the purl sides. How I can tell is there's these little V's. The V always means knit side. So if I can see little V's, that means it's the knit side. Flipping it over, you can see there is not those little V's. It's all bumps. So that's how I'm able to tell that it's the purl side. That's this one. These are all the different types of eyelet mesh that you can make. This is a fantastic beginner stitch pattern that incorporates knits, purls, and also yarn overs, making it look a little bit fancier and more technical than what it actually is. There are many different types of mesh. I was seeing, when I was researching this, there's a bunch of different ones. I think Irish was one that almost looks more like diamonds in the patterning of it. But I think this is probably the most basic that you're going to be able to do. So I hope you enjoyed this video, found it helpful, and I would love to see some of your work if you decide to do this. I am just so obsessed with this one. I love how it looks. But I will see you all next week. Bye!